Soil laboratory, where we're going to be looking at understanding soil texture and structure, which is very important in understanding how we use land for the different purposes, which is appropriate for our lectures that we'll be doing on this. So please follow the instructions and watch this video, of course, and watch the other video I provide that shows how to do one of the procedures, at least for collecting soil, and read the laboratory instructions carefully. Now, before starting your lab, you will need to, of course, read the lab instructions. Also, make sure that you have the answer sheet pulled up. There's a separate answer sheet to put your results, and watch the lab activity video that goes along with the laboratory exercise. But you also need, before starting the activity, a container to collect soil, and all you need is a little about the soil, no more than like 2 cups of soil for this experiment, and that's probably a little more than you'll need, but just in case you mess up, it's nice to have some. And you can collect the soil from anywhere basically where you can get a good sample of soil, and you might end up with leaves and grass and other stuff in the soil, and that is fine. You need a 1 quart clear or plastic jar to do part 1 of your experiment in, just a couple of drops of dishwashing soap or liquid hand soap, a ruler, preferably to measure in metric, but if you measure in English systems, that's fine. A measuring cup to control the amount of water you'll be using, a tablespoon, and also a bottle filled with water, squeeze bottle, and that's going to be used to squeeze water on your hands and to rinse the soil in part 2. So please, before you do this part of the experiment, look at the video that I provided you with that shows how to make this jar. So your goal is to collect some soil and come up with a jar like this. And the instruction is going to be, you're going to have to leave this sit for a day, and then, stir it again, and then let this thing settle to look for these particles. So to begin with, when you're taking your measurements, you're going to be trying to calculate how much percent of this soil is sand, silt, or clay. And you have to look at the lecture video and read the book to understand these terms and what it means to have a soil texture profile. So when we look at the jar and it's settling and you're taking your measurements, this part you're basically going to ignore. This is just going to be fine particles that don't really classify as clay, silt, or sand. And you're also going to see bits and pieces of leaves, maybe a couple of small insects or soil animals or worms in there, but just leave this part alone. So don't worry about that, except you might want to, just take a picture of it and whatever, and maybe explain what you think's in that picture. So your most important measurements are going to be right here. You're going to be interested in where the top of this clay is down to the bottom of the jar, and that's going to be what's called your total soil depth, and that's going to be this number here that you're going to plug into these formulas. So that's going to be your total depth, a measurement from here to here, the top of the clay to the bottom of the sand, or maybe gravel on the bottom of there. Now, to measure your percent sand, you're going to measure from where you see the top of your sand to the bottom of the jar. So from here to here, that number in inches or millimeters is then going to go there. To do the depth of the silt, you're now going to go the depth of the silt, which runs from here, not to the bottom of the jar, but to the top of the sand, because these particles are going to settle on top of the sand. So that measurement, that distance from here to here, goes there. And then for the clay, which this soil is very low in clay, it's going to be the distance from the top of the clay to the top of the silt, and that number goes here. So you have 3 numbers that give you a percent, and it should add up to 100% if you did everything right. So now, what do you do with those numbers that you now calculated for these? You're going to take those now and look at the type of soil categorization that you have. Because in your lecture, you learn that soil categorization depends on what you can do with this soil. So let's first start with percent clay. We'll work kind of upside down. So the percent clay for this one is right about 12%. So you're going to draw a dot right about here. And then what you're going to do with that dot is you're going to just take an imaginary line, and you can actually print out this triangle and write on it if you want. You don't have to submit it. You can if you want to take a picture of it, but that line's going to go across like this, and just do it like that. And now you have your clay measurement. And you're going to see that this clay measurement crosses certain categories of soil. But now let's look at your silt measurement. Now the silt measurement is going to go down. You'll see what I mean in a minute. So we're going to take the silt, and the silt is about 38%, right about here. So put a dot right there, and then that line goes, whoops, should have been a straight line, kind of goes down to right about here. And there should be an intersection point. Now you're going to take your percent sand and make a third line that's going to go up. So the sand is about 50%, which is a very sandy soil. And that 50% is going to go right on that line. And now you're going to have an intersection point right here. And you're going to see that it's in the category of loam, but also on the border of sandy loam. But it's still what we call the loam category, that term right there. So a loam soil is an excellent soil for agriculture. It's perfect gardening soil for most regions, particularly temperate regions and subtropical regions like ours. So this is what we do for part one. Your goal is to get that answer and take a picture of the soil so I can, your jar, so I can see what it looks like. Part two, the ribbon method, and this is we don't have a kit and the materials for you to do this the real technical way, but what we do out in the field. I mean, I've done this before, and this was with farmers. This is what farmers do and gardeners do, is they do what's called the ribbon method, and it gives them another way of determining the soil texture in a little more rough way. So you watch, read the instructions on this carefully in the lab manual, because what you're going to do is take, a wad full of clay, soil, is to tell you how much to do. Roll it in your hands into kind of a cylinder, and then you're going to squeeze that cylinder. So he's rolling it into a ball, and then going to squeeze it, kind of roll it into a cylinder, and then squeeze that cylinder out between the thumb and the top of the hand to make a flat ribbon. And you're going to see how long you can kind of squeeze out a ribbon. This is going to take practice. So just do this over and over again to make a ribbon. Okay, you can also make a ribbon by putting rolling the soil into like a cigar and kind of rolling it out, flattening it out with your hands, and then picking up the ribbon to see where it breaks. But the best way to do it is just squeeze it through your fingers. And then what you're going to do is look at the length of the ribbon. If the soil is high in clay, the ribbon would usually be very sticky. You're going to have to pay attention to that, and also kind of squeeze out into a large ribbon. And that will tell you that soil is very high in clay. It can belong to these categories. These here tend to be smaller ribbons, a little more sandy feeling, and those are going to be more what we call clay loams. They have a lot of silt. And then here you're going to start getting soils that are very gritty, very rough, going to feel like sandpaper, because they're going to contain sand. And those can fit this category of soils here. So it's a very simple test, but record your data in your lab answer sheet and compare it to part one. You're basically comparing part one to part two to see if you get consistent results. So in your lab answer sheet, and please use the lab answer sheet to put your answers. Don't use the lab instructions itself. Is record your answers for both labs, do your best that you can, and please submit pictures with it. You can take pictures of the soils and your results with your cell phones and just submit it as a separate file, or you can attach the photos to an additional page of the lab report. But please put your lab report in a Dropbox. And that's it. Good luck with the lab, and I think you will have fun, and make sure to wash your hands afterwards. Bye.